Then we have the concept of yukta vairagya. We said that this renunciation and jnana are not angas of bhakti. Nevertheless, detachment also is necessary, because we should be willing to give up things for the Supreme Lord, etc. And the qualification was not too attached to the material things also. So vairagya automatically develops through the process of bhakti. That is called yukta vairagya. We utilize things in the service of the Lord. When it employs objects suitable for devotional development, remaining detached from them. So that type of use of objects is favorable. This leads to higher bhakti, and consequently it leads to more detachment from material things. So this is a natural form of renunciation. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandha. The object should be persistently related with Krishna. Phalgu Vairagya. Rejection of things related to the Lord by persons desiring liberation who think that things are simply material objects is called useless Vairagya. So at the end of the Vaidhi Bhakti section, after the Angas, Rupa Goswami mentions performance of one Anga. Of course, this doesn't mean they only did that Anga, but it was a principal Anga by which they got success. So Sukadev by reciting Bhagavatam, Kirtan, Parikshit by hearing the Bhagavatam, Prahlad by the process of Smaranam, Akrura by the process of prayers, offering his prayers, Vandanam, Lakshmi by Padasevanam, Hanuman by Dasya, service, Arjuna by Sakya, Prithu by Archana, Bali by Atmanivedana, offering himself, and many Angas was Ambarish. So the message is one can do one prominent Anga, or one can do many Angas, or combination of them, and in any case one can succeed. Okay, that's Vaidhi Bhakti. Raganuga Bhakti. Okay. So this Raganuga is part of sadhana bhakti. Raganuga is not prema, nor is bhava. It is sadhana bhakti. So it is not even realization of the Lord, technically. So we had our definition of pure bhakti. That was the first definition. Yeah. Within that, then we have sadhana, bhava, and prema. Now within sadhana, we've covered Vaidhi Bhakti. Who remembers the definition of Vaidhi Bhakti? That was sadhana bhakti, not Vaidhi Bhakti.
Or rules and regulations. Rules and regulations.
According to rules and regulations. Okay.
With fear.
Yeah. So, rules and regulations. That was Vaidhi Bhakti. Now we do Raganuga Bhakti. Also part of sadhana bhakti. Engagement of the senses to attain bhava. We have another method other than following the rules of scripture. So there was sadhana bhakti, engage the senses. That applies also to Raganuga. We're trying to attain bhava. So this sadhana of Raganuga leads us to realizing Krishna in bhava stage. Engagement of the senses. But it is different from Vaidhi Bhakti. So what is it? Raganuga Bhakti is defined as that bhakti which follows after the Ragatmaka Bhakti found distinctively in the inhabitants of Vraja. So obviously this Raganuga Bhakti is not for Rama, is not for anyone except Krishna. Because it is based upon the people of Vraja. Ragatmaka Bhakti is found in Yasoda and the Gopis and Nanda Maharaj and others. And it's not found in Ayodhya or Vaikuntha. Ragatmaka Bhakti. So it is only for Krishna. So Vaidhi Bhakti is general for all devotees of all forms of the Lord. Raganuga is specifically for Krishna. So to follow after that Ragatmaka Bhakti in the followers of Vraja, people of Vraja, that is called to follow after that Bhakti, or to desire that same mood and act in the same way, that is called Raganuga Bhakti. So, as I mentioned, to follow after the Ragatmakas also is a sadhana, it is kriti sadhya, we're engaging the senses to do that, and is part of this Krishna Anusilanam. So we can't divorce from the regular definition or for the definition of sadhana. Now, what is raga? Raga is defined as spontaneous, deep thirst for the object of love. Bhakti that is impelled exclusively by such sources is called Ragatmaka Bhakti. As I said, this type of Ragatmaka Bhakti, which is spontaneous and deep, is found in Raja and not in other places. Not in Dwarka, even.
Mathura. Navadvip?
No.
Oh, Navadvip?
That's not included here, so technically no, because this only includes Krishna.
Puri, no. Jagannath Puri?
So, Ragatmaka Bhakti is found in the people of Raja, the gopis, Nanda and Yasoda, the cowherd boys, and the servants in Raja, not in others. Following after the mood and actions of those Ragatmaka Bhaktis is called Raganuga. These Krishna's blue there. Okay. Qualification. A person who is greedy for attaining a bhava similar to that of the inhabitants of Raja is qualified for Raganuga. So the main thing here is that great desire to attain the same type of bhava. Greedy for attaining that bhava. Qualification. Appearance of that greed is indicated when the intelligence does not depend on the rules of scripture and logic after realizing to some degree the sweetness that are allowed through the process of hearing from the scriptures. So what we have here is go to the scriptures and hear obviously the pastimes of Krishna, and through that we begin to become attracted to that sweetness of particular relationship of Krishna with his devotees, a particular relationship, and based on that we develop the desire to develop a similar type of mood, and then we practice Raganuga with less dependence on scriptural regulations, Vaidhi. So that does not mean that Vaidhi Bhakti is completely devoid of spontaneity, but that spontaneity appears in Bhav Bhakti within Vaidhi Bhakti. In other words, once one realizes the Lord in Bhav Bhakti through Vaidhi, then there's less dependence on the rules that also in that. But at the same time, the cause is a little different. So we should not think that Raganuga is completely independent of Scripture. As I said, it arises from hearing Scripture itself, and at no point is it completely independent of Scripture. It is also a type of sadhana only. So, whenever the greed has appeared, it is understood the person must have studied the scriptures in order to attain that greed. It is also necessary to study the scriptures in order to understand the proper sadhana for Raganuga. In other words, we depend on Raganuga to help us attain that stage, and also we need it for guidance on how to do the sadhana. So it's not independent of scripture. What are the activities? Remembering the Vrindavan form of Krishna and his dear associates who have inclinations for service similar to one's own, absorbing oneself and hearing topics related to them. One should always live in Raja. So living in the Dham and Vrindavan, hearing the pastimes of Krishna, particularly the particular service and type of devotee, and engaging in some types of service. So these are the activities. This does not mean, of course, that one rejects the other activities. We have hearing and remembering, living in the Dham. These are very principal things. If one can't live in the Dham, what does one do? That at least we should live there mentally. So that does not mean we reject the other angas also. One should perform one's service in one's physical body and in one's siddha body That is, we meditate on our body we would have in the spiritual world. We serve the Lord in that form also. So we go through the activities in the regular body, or chanting, remembering, etc. And then in our siddha body, our spiritual body, which is not really spiritual yet, but it's going to be spiritual later in bhava stage, we serve in another body internally through meditation. We serve the Lord in that body. That's called the siddha body. For instance, for those in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, generally, if it was in Madhurya Bhava, then it's Manjari Bhava, following the group of Radha. So therefore, one meditates on a Manjari body, and then one serves the other associates of Radha and Radha in that body mentally. That is the sadhana in the Siddha Deha. And physically, then we do our service following after Rupa and Sanatana, etc., whatever they did, like hearing and chanting and worshipping the deity. We go through that process also in the physical body. So internally, we serve the Lord in our spiritual body, and then physically we serve doing the regular angas. Like that. So this Siddha Deha is not a real Siddha Deha at that point. It is only a practice to attain the Siddha Deha, actually. Though we call it a Siddha Deha. It will become the body when you attain your bhava and prema. So it's like a reflection of your spiritual body at this point. And then by practice and entrance into bhava, then it begins to manifest and manifest fully in prema. So we don't reject the other angas, hearing, chanting, remembering, deity worship, etc., which are in Vaidhi Bhakti, are also included in Raganuga Bhakti. What are the types of Raganuga? We have Madhurya, Bhava, of two types, trying to enjoy directly with Krishna or simply taking up the mood and serving others in that mood. And Madhurya Bhava as gopis or whatever. So what happens if we are interested in Krishna or Madhurya Bhava, but we do Vaidhi Bhakti, not Raganuga Bhakti? So one option is one can go to Dwarka and become a queen in Dwarka, like that. But then of course the other point is that if we're not worshipping Krishna in Dwarka, or worshipping Krishna in Vrindavan, then what happens?
Mathura.
But we do Vaidhi Bhakti, not Raganuga Bhakti.
Mathura.
No. Vrindavan.
No.
So we go to Aishwarya Goloka, which is like Vrindavan, but everyone sees Krishna as God there also at the same time. So Aishwarya Goloka. So, though we talk about Raganuga as mainly being Gopi Bhava and all that, and Manjari Bhava, it's not. Raganuga includes Vatsalya Bhava and Dasya and everything. Everything in Vrindavan, all these different Bhavas can be Raganuga. So we're going to have parental rasa. The Vallabhas are basically practicing Raganuga and Vatsalya rasa. So that's mentioned by Rupa Goswami at the end of this Raganuga section. It's called Pushti Marga. It's Raganuga. So the Vallabhas do that. But that's Vatsalya Bhava. So we're going to have Raganuga in Sakya Rasa or Dasya Rasa or Vatsalya or Madhurya Bhava. Generally in Madhurya Bhava, the Gaudiyas emphasize that, and in that they take the Manjari Bhava. Okay. What is the cause of Raganuga? Mercy of Krishna's devotees is the only cause of attaining Raganuga Bhakti. So ultimately, the association of devotees will cause that development of Raganuga. So what happens is, through Vaidhi sadhana, you end up with a bhava. Based upon that, there's a Vaidhi utta bhava, bhava arising from Vaidhi. That will then lead to prema, which arises from that Vaidhi sadhana. So that type of prema will be different from the Raganuga. There'll be a different influence there. What is the difference? The prema. In this Vaidhi Utta prema, one realizes God and develops rasa, but one is aware that He is the Lord, Supreme Lord, so therefore there'll be some reverence in that relationship, even if it's with Krishna. Whereas in Raganuga Utta Bhakti, no, it is like the people in Vrindavan who don't have any reverence for Krishna. They don't see Him as God. That will be the difference in the types of prema. This is only with Krishna. This can be for Vishnu or anybody. So, yeah. So, Lord Chaitanya, of course, said that actually without going through Raganuga, you cannot enter into Raja. So one have to come to the Raganuga stage, but we see that mainly in ISKCON we don't mention Raganuga at all. And we emphasize Vaidhi Bhakti. So, what did Lord Chaitanya says? You act according to fixed vow, you'll realize all perfections of chanting the holy names. There's no other rule than this. So, the main idea is we stress the chanting of the holy name. And through chanting the holy name, of course, gradually one can realize the form, qualities, activities, lila, etc. of the Lord, and rasa, through that chanting process. So that's the main item there. And within ISKCON, of course, Gaur Kishore also says your Sruta will do chanting Hare Krishna mantra. So there's the opposite party that says you have to go through the Siddha Pranali method and get your Siddha Deha from a Babaji and Radhakund, and that's the only way you can go to develop your spiritual body. But obviously you can get spiritual body without it, because all the Vaidhi Bhaktas and other Sampradayas go up to Vaikuntha and get four-arm forms without having to meditate on a spiritual form with 4 arms, etc. So without going through a Siddha Deha process, you can do that. A Siddha Pranali process, you can do that. But Rupa Goswami says that the Raganuga process definitely quickens the process by actually choosing a particular type of body and meditating on that in sadhana. Then that helps you quicken your process of developing your spiritual body and developing bhava and prema. But he does not mention the particular Siddha Pranali process that the Babajis use, which is a particular process where you get 11 things like name for manjari, the color of your cloth and your service and whatever, all these sort of things from a particular guru. That was started by in Puri by a group of devotees there, Dhyan Chandra and others. So they started this process, and it spread to the Babajis, and then it went to Vrindavan in Radhakund. So that process is followed there. But one can develop Siddha Deha or use the Siddha Deha without that. So actually, Vishwanath in his commentary says you can develop that through, of course, other devotees can give it, or through initiation of some person, or it can come through the heart also, in developing that Siddha body. Jiva Goswami also mentioned a combined form of Raganuga and Vaidhi Bhakti. One in whom this taste has not arisen, but who has come to appreciate Raganuga Bhakti on account of appreciation for a particular saint or scripture may practice Raganuga with a mixture of Vaidhi Bhakti. So there's an in-between stage also where you can mix the elements. So, actually, though we say we're practicing Vaidhi Bhakti, this Vaidhi Bhakti is also a little different from the Vaidhi Bhakti practiced by other Sampradayas. We'll see that dependence on rules and regulations is not so strong, and the idea of spontaneity, a little more flexibility in the rules, is also there within our group as well. So it's not the same type of Vaidhi Bhakti as other Sampradayas. The other aspect, of course, is that we are taking our main subject as Krishna and Vrindavan, according to Lord Chaitanya's teachings, and we are aspiring to that type of spontaneous relationship. So we're not aspiring to develop awe and reverence and Vaikuntha type of thing anyway. So even though we're practicing Vaidhi Bhakti, it is actually the main subject is Krishna, and the object is Krishna and Radha and Krishna, etc. So we're headed in that direction, even if we are doing Vaidhi Bhakti. So it's more or less a combination of Raganuga and Vaidhi. In Raganuga and after, there are some stages. There's the Shravana stage, Shravana Dasa, hearing about the pastimes in Vraja. Varna, getting the Siddha Deha from a guru, that would be in the Siddha Pranali system. Smarana, you practice with your Siddha Deha through Ruchi and Asakti stages. And more and more, Smarana becomes Dharana and Dhyana, Anusmriti, and Samadhi. It becomes more and more concentrated. Apana stage and Bhava stage, you realize you're the Supreme Lord, and you actually realize your body in that stage. Sampati, you give up your body. And you go to the spiritual world in Prema. So those stages can be, of course, categorized like this. The Bhajna Kriya, the Sravana will go all the way into Nishta, then you get Varana, and Ruchi you get Smarana, Bhava, Apana, and Prema, Sampati. So why we don't emphasize the Raganuga in our particular, since Bhakti Siddhanta onwards, less emphasis on rules produces some laxity in one's vows and services. There's a tendency to disregard the rules as a result of that. Though it is not mentioned like that in Nectar of Devotion, it's obviously, it doesn't say we reject the rules of Scripture or anything like that. Still, tendency of people in Kali Yuga is to, because the emphasis on spontaneity, that we do become lax in those rules. So that's one problem. Also is to identify if we're doing Raganuga with Madhurya Rasa, and then we may identify the Madhurya Rasa pastimes as material. May then develop material desires. So this process, therefore, is more suited to people who have already renounced, more or less, the material world, and not so suitable for householders. It requires intense concentration on chanting many hours a day. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur recommends you chant 64 rounds a day, and you also meditate all day long on the different pastimes of Krishna. The Astakali Alila, 8 parts of the day are there, in which Krishna and the gopis are going through different pastimes each day, and throughout the day you're chanting and meditating on your service in those different types of the day. So therefore you really can't work or do anything else. You've got to sit all day and chant. So it's not very practical for most people in the world. It's only practical for Babajis or whatever. And it's also difficult to preach this as a common practice for everybody in the public. So that is why our recent acharyas like Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada don't emphasize the Raganuga so much as something that's not practical for beginners. Okay, fine. The next sections are actually very small. Bhava Bhakti and Prem Bhakti. The reason is that Prem Bhakti is the subject of the rest of the book. So the other 3 waves are all about Prem Bhakti. So the definition of sadhana bhakti was engagement of the senses to lead to bhava. That's the second type of bhakti. So what is the definition? Sudha sattva visheshatma prema suri amsu samya bhat ruchi bistritra masrinya krit asabhava uchate. When one begins to experience bliss, a ray of prema, prema surya amsu, consisting of the Samvit and Hladini Shaktis, that's sattva, Sudha sattva visheshatma, coming from Krishna's Sarup Shakti, and the heart becomes softened by attraction to Krishna, ruchi chitta masrinya krit. It is called bhava. So, bliss is there, but one ray of bliss. One ray of the bliss of prema. So we got ananda, spiritual, and the heart becomes softened by attraction to Krishna. So, what is Samvit? Samvit is, obviously means spiritual knowledge or consciousness, spiritual ability to perceive, spiritual senses, etc. So the Samvit Shakti gives us the ability to perceive the Lord, and experience the Lord with our different hearing, smelling, seeing, etc. Hladini Shakti gives the power to experience the bliss, spiritual bliss. So we perceive the Lord and we experience the Lord, the bliss of the Lord, in serving the Lord. So that one ray of the sun of prema is experienced here. So at this stage, we mentioned about Chester Rupa Bhakti and Bhava Rupa Bhakti, active service, and then the Bhava element. So service through the Bhava aspect becomes prominent here because the Sthayi Bhava manifests in Bhava stage. Bhava is called Bhava because of Sthayi Bhava. A particular relationship becomes manifest with Krishna, that is Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya. Qualities, there will be a few ecstatic symptoms, not continuous and not all of them. So sattvika bhavas like fainting or crying or shivering of the body or choking of the voice or changing color. Manifest, but not all the time. Bhava is spiritual, independent of matter, but manifests at this time in the body of the devotee so he can experience the spiritual world. So you got a material body, but you develop internally the perception of the Lord. It appears through the mental function and replaces the mind. So, in other words, the mind and the senses become spiritualized. Though self-manifesting, it appears to arise by the mind. So it appears in the body, but actually it's not arising because of the body. It's independent. The soul itself, plus spiritual shaktis of the Lord, manifest within the jiva. Bhava is a taste for Krishna, but also produces more taste for Krishna. So bhava is the stage of, we can say, the first stage of prema. It's no longer a sadhana. We don't practice it to get something. In other words, it naturally increases. So it produces more taste for Krishna by itself. So it's not a sadhana. That relationship with the Lord simply develops and develops and develops after that point. Cause, sadhana, normal method. We do sadhana and we go through, nishta, ruchi, sakti, and we get to bhava from Vaidhi Bhakti. So example is given of Narada Muni in the Bhagavatam. He heard from the sadhus and he took the prasadam and whatever. He began hearing more like that, got their mercy. And then he began to develop through the different stages of Nishta, Ruchi, Sakti, and he got to Bhava. That is through Vaidhi, basically. The other stage is through Raganuga. Second way is through mercy of Krishna without the sadhana or with very little sadhana. Without going through the stages of sadhana of Nishta, Ruchi, Sakti, suddenly you get Bhava. You may do a little sadhana in the beginning or whatever. It may be words. The Lord may say, I come and bless you. You have Bhava. And then you get Bhava. It may, or the devotee may also do that. Darshana, you see the Lord and then develop Bhava. Or through the heart, somehow you get some emotional inspiration and develop it without the Lord speaking or making himself visible. Suddenly you develop and then you're able to see the Lord. Mercy of devotees. For instance, Prahlad got Narada Muni's mercy in the womb, and Mrigari the hunter got the mercy of Narada and Parvata Muni, and in 3 months he got Bhava. Another, of course, is that continuation from previous lifetime. So you may have developed sadhana in the previous lifetime up to Bhava almost, and then in this you get Bhava in this lifetime because of that. Types: Shanta, Bhava, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya Bhava. These are the basic types. There are different qualities in Bhava stage, which are just straightforward. Tolerance or Kshanti, not wasting time on material things. Virakti, detachment from material things. Mansunyata, absence of pride. Asabandha, confidence in the Lord's mercy. Samutkanta, longing for the Lord. Name Ruchi, taste for chanting the name of the Lord. Katanaya Sakti, attachment to hearing about the Lord. Vasati Stale Priti, attachment to living in the Dham. So we see that all these later ones especially are quite straightforward in attachment to different angas of bhakti. Longing for the Lord, taste for chanting, attachment to hearing, attachment to living in the Dham. This, some of the main angas of bhakti are mentioned there. So these become very prominent qualities in this devotee. There's something called Rati Abhas. Rati means bhava. Abhas means a dull form of the same thing, like the sun behind the clouds. We see this little image of the sun behind the cloud. That is an abhas of the sun. Sort of like a shadow or a secondary image. So we have Rati Abhas. It looks like bhava. It has some of the qualities of bhava, but it isn't. So sometimes non-devotees can manifest bhava or rati symptoms. But it's not, it's called Rati Abhas or Bhava Abhas because it's not the real thing. Such as Sahajiyas, the people. One is called Pratibimba Rati Abhas. People may imitate, consciously imitate devotees and develop symptoms and imitation of crying and whatever, fainting and whatever, imitation. So that, of course, is very devious. It's just imitation. And actually they desire mukti or bhukti or whatever. Not very good. That is called Chaya Rati Namabas, Rati Abas. This is a person is not so devious or whatever. So he does have some genuine spiritual experience or whatever. But it's a very temporary experience for him. But this person can develop real rati by association with devotees. So sometimes neophytes may be very cry or whatever like that. So they're not on the stage of bhava, but they've developed some of the symptoms of sattvika bhavas or whatever. So, and they're not also imitating. So those are called chaya rati abhas. But it's temporary symptoms which will only manifest really in the bhava stage later on. Real bhava can degrade through aparad. So serious aparad, bhava disappears completely. No bhakti then. Medium aparad, bhava turns to bhava bhas, a very slight shadow of bhava. Or mild aparad, the bhava slightly weakens, in degree, like that. Faults in the bhava bhakta. Apparent faults must be overlooked, because that devotee has reached an exalted stage, so that activities cannot be judged by a lower person. So as I gave the example of the moon, we should not criticize the moon and say it has spots on it. So in the same way, we don't criticize the bhava bhakta, even if we see some faults. Okay, so then prem bhakti, last section. What is the definition? Samyak masrinata swanto mamatva adisankha ankita bhava sa eva sandra ma buddha prema nigadyate. In the previous definition, we also had chitta masrunya, or softening of the heart. Here it is samyak masrinata swanta, completely softened, completely melted. In other words, complete devotion to the Lord at this stage. Complete dedication and surrender to the Lord. And complete attachment to the Lord. Mamata atisayamkita. Complete attachment to the possessiveness of the Lord. And sandra, very intense, the bliss. And so that is called prema. So there was bliss in bhava, now it is sandra, very intense. There was melting of the heart, but now it's completely melting of the heart. Attachment to the Lord, now it is complete attachment, intense attachment to the Lord. So that's the difference, it's a higher stage. Causes from bhava, from the Vaidhi Utta bhava, through the sadhana bhakti, Vaidhi, we go through bhava, and then we get to prema. So one can develop Rama bhakti through that process, or Vaidhi bhakti, Hanuman's example of that, Dasya, or Vishnu forms also, like that. From Raganuga to bhava. So we go Raganuga sadhana, we get Raganuga derived bhava, and then we have Raga influence prema. So this is only for Krishna in Raja. For mercy of Krishna, by his presence words, like in bhava. So one can, by the mercy of Krishna, one can get two types. One is Mahatmya Gyan Yukta, awareness of the Lord's greatness for those practicing Vaidhi Marga. So you can get the mercy of Krishna and develop prema through, and develop into the Vaidhi type of awareness of the Lord, and with Vishnu or other forms. Or Kevala Prema, by the mercy of the Lord, then you also get the Raja Prema. No awareness of the Lord's greatness for those practicing Raga Marga. So we can go directly from a sadhana of Raga Marga, bypassing bhava, and get to prema by the mercy of the Lord. Or if you're doing Vaidhi Bhakti, then you would get mercy and go to Vaidhi Utta Prema. Like that. Okay. What are the activities? His activities can now be understood even by men knowledgeable of Scripture. So, he doesn't describe anything else. It says you cannot describe the Prem Bhakta. You can do everything contrary to everything else, or most extraordinary things. So example is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He exhibited, of course he's Supreme Lord himself, exhibiting Radha's mood, and he exhibited the most extreme symptoms that no one had heard of before in his manifestations of prema. Oh, that's it. Fine.
Wait.
Hare Krishna, this is small announcement.